Hello everyone, today we're going to be going over the digital SAT practice test number 1. We're going to be looking at the math section, specifically module 1, right? So module 1 is 27 math questions. You can use a calculator for all of them. Today I'm going to be using Desmos because this is the calculator that the SAT or the College Board gives you on the day of the SAT. Everyone will be able to use Desmos for the math section. I'm going to use it because of that. First question asks 27 questions. Let's start off with number 1. It says, what is 10% of 470? Whenever you see an of in one of these problems, of just means multiply, right? So if we translate this to math, right, what is 10% of 470? This is really asking us 10% times 470 is equal to what, right? So that's just 0.10 times 470 is equal to what? If you don't know how to do this, you can plug this into Desmos, right? Really simple math. You could just type in 0.10 times 470, and you get 47 as your answer. If you don't know where I found that, equal sign is 47 right there. Right, moving on to number 2, it says, which equation has the same solution as the given equation, right? So when we have the same solution, we're dealing with like a specific x value, right? So this thing, right, its x value is going to be like a specific number, and just asking us which that number matches up with the x value for which one of these values, right? So it's going to become a lot more clear what we have to do soon. So the first step, what we have to do is actually find the solution to this equation, right? So 4x plus 6 is equal to 18. What's the solution? Subtract 6 from both sides, we get 4x is equal to 12, and that x is simply equal to 3. So now it's asking us which one of these, right, is set up in such a way that x also equals to 3, and that's going to be choice C, right? Because if we look here, 4x is equal to 12, divide by 4 on both sides. X is equal to 12 divided by 4, which is just 3. That's all. So find the solution here, which was 3, and then C, whichever equation matches that. Number 3 says the total cost in dollars to rent surfboards consists of a $25 service fee and a $10 per hour rental fee. A person rents a surfboard for T hours and intends to spend a maximum of $75 to rent the surfboard. Which inequality represents the situation, right? So we're given a lot of variables here. First, there's a $25 service fee, right? And this service fee is always going to be the same. So I'm going to put that red, and I'm going to construct my formula. I'm going to put that in red. I'm going to put it right here, plus 25, right? So no matter what you do, no matter how long you stay for this rental, you're always going to have to pay a $25 service fee, right? In addition to that $25 service fee, there's a $10 per hour rental fee, right? So every hour that you rent the surfboard, you have to pay $10. And we know that he rents the surfboard for T hours. So to represent this, I can just write 10T plus, I'll put that in orange so it's easier to see, 25, and this is equal to my total, right? So here, it's $10 per hour to rent it, right? So it's $10, and T is our hours, right? So if I rent this for 2 hours, I have to pay $20. This is represented by this part. And then there's a $25 service fee, and this, you know, is your constant because it doesn't matter how long you surf for, there's always going to be a $25 service fee, right? So now that we know that our total is going to equal to 10T plus 25. Now he's saying that a person wants to rent a surfboard for T hours, so we don't know how long, and we know that he wants to spend a maximum of $75, right? So we know that no matter what we do, we cannot go over 75. So 75 has to be greater than or equal to this total. Now all we have to do is just solve for T. So we subtract 25 on both sides, we get 50 is greater than or equal to... Oh, we don't even need to solve. I should have read the question more thoroughly. The answer to this, of course, is going to be D. This is literally what we wrote. 25, which is our flat fee, plus 10 times T hours, which is going to be our hourly, has to be less than or equal to 75. Right, number 4 says a function g is defined by g of x is equal to x squared plus 9, for which values of x is g of x equal to 25. So literally, it's asking us what value of x will make g of x equal to 25. We know g of x is equal to this, right? So we can just plug that in for g of x, right? So if g of x is equal to 25, we can just say that x squared plus 9 is equal to 25, right? These are the same thing. And all it's asking us is what value of x, right, is going to equal to 25. So we just subtract 9 on both sides. So we get x squared is equal to 16. The square root of 16 is going to be 4. That means that x has to equal to 4, right? If you get confused by this whole g of x notation, g of x is the same thing as saying y equals. So here, the same thing as saying y equals x squared plus 9. And it's the same thing as saying y equals 25 when x is equal to what? That's it, just solve for x. Number 5 says Each face of a fair 14-sided die is labeled with the number 1 through 14, with a different number appearing on each face. If a die is rolled one time, what is the probability of rolling a 2? So, if we have this die, right, and it has 14 sides, so has 14 different numbers on it, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and I'll squeeze 14 down here, right? So this is every single number that's on that die, and it's asking me, if I roll this once, what's my probability of rolling a 12, of rolling a 2, right? So let's count these sides. Where is our 2? Our 2 is here, right? So if I roll it once, if I roll this die once, I can get a 2 a total of 1 time, right? If I roll this, I can get a 2 1 time, right? I can get it once out of 14 other options, so my probability is going to be 1 over 14. The equation for probability is going to be part over whole, right? So in this case, what is our part? Our part, or the thing that we're trying to get, right? How probable is rolling a 2? We want a 2, right? So the 2 is what part of the whole? Well, the 2 is just 1, right? There's only 1 2 in here, so our part has to be 1, because 2 occurs only once, and our whole, which is the rest of the probability, the rest of the possibilities, well, there are 14 other numbers that we can come up on. There are 14 other numbers that we can get, and we're only looking for one of them, right? So out of 14 total combinations, 2 is one of the 14, which means that our probability is 1 over 14. Number 6 says, a printer produces posters at a constant rate of 42 posters per minute. At what rate in posters per hour does the printer produce posters? It's a lot of P words, but what it's saying is that we have 42 posters being produced in 1 minute, right? And it's asking me, how many can it do in 1 hour? Well, if you think about it, this is in minutes, right? And if I want to convert from minutes to hours, how many minutes are in an hour? Well, 60 minutes are in 1 hour, right? So, if we do 42 of these in 1 minute, how many of these do we do in 60 minutes or 1 hour? Just multiply this whole thing by 60 minutes, right? And if we multiply this by 60, our answer is going to have to be what? It's going to have to be 60 times 42, which is 2,520. 2,520 posters. If we produce 42 posters in 1 minute, we will produce 42 times 60 posters in 1 hour. That's all. Another way you could have done this is you could have set up the related, not related rate, but you know, this fraction, right? So here you have 42 posters, and whenever you see per, just know that that's the denominator. So 42 posters get produced in 1 minute. In other words, you have 42 posters per minute, right? And we want to convert this into posters over hours, over 1 hour, right? So in order to get posters over 1 hour, I just need to cancel out this minutes and make this denominator hours. So in 1 hour, there are 60 minutes. And look here, when I multiply these two, the minutes cancel out, and I'm left with 42 times 60 over 1, and that gives me 42 times 60 posters over 1 hour, right? So the units match up. So number 7 is the fraction f is defined by the equation f of x is equal to 7x plus 2. What is the value of f of x when x is equal to 4? Easy, 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 right? So what is f of x when x is equal to 4? If this confuses you, just look at this as y is equal to 7x plus 2. F of x and y are the same thing, right? So y is equal to 7x plus 2 when x is equal to 4. So what is y equal to when x is equal to 4? Well, y is equal to, plug in x as 4, that's how you solve these problems, 28 plus 2. 7 times 4 is equal to 28, and 28 plus 2 is equal to 30, so y has to equal to 30. Simple. So now we're going to move on to number 8. It says a teacher is creating an assignment worth 70 points. The assignment will consist of questions worth 1 point and questions worth 3 points. Which equation represents a situation where x represents the number of 1-point equations and y represents the number of 3-point equations, right? So the assignment is worth 70 points, right? Which means that in total, every single question has to equal to 70. And we can see that reflected in the answers. Everything has to equal to 70, right? So what else is here, or what else happens, is that you have questions worth 1 point and you have questions worth 3 points. So the total number of 1-point questions plus the total number of 3-point have to equal to 70 points in total, right? Now, it's saying that x represents the number of 1-point questions. So here, x is representing 1, and here, y is really representing 3-point questions, right? So, x plus y, when you account for the points, is going to equal to 70, right? So, let's say, for example, I have like 2 3-point questions. That's going to equal to 6 points. How can I represent that? I could just represent that as multiplying the variable that represents the question by the amount that it's worth, right? So, for example, if a x represents a 1-point question, I could just write that as 1 times x, and that gives me the total number of points that all the 1-point questions give me. And now I could do the same thing with y, so 3 times y is equal to 70. So here I have x plus 3y is equal to 70, right? And that's going to be choice D. So all you had to figure out here was how to represent x in terms of the amount of points, right? So for example, if I have like 5 1-point questions, that means that 5 is equal to x, right? Because x represents the number of 1-point questions. If I have 5 1-point questions, that means that 5 is equal to x. But now I want to figure out how many total points are these 5 questions worth, right? Well, they're worth 1 point each, so 5 is really the total value of them. Now I could do the same thing with y. If I have 5 3-point questions, my y is now equal to 5, right? Because I have 5 3-point questions. But now I want to know how many points they're worth, right? Well, if I have 5 questions and they're each worth 3 points, I could just multiply it by 3, right? So 15 is equal to 3y, right? Because whatever I do on one side, I have to do on the other. So I have to multiply this by 3. And what you see here is that this format works for any type of points. If I have 6 3-point questions, right? 6 questions and they're each worth 3 points, that's 6 times 3, that's going to be 18. In other words, that's just 3y when y is equal to 6, right? So that's just how you represent that. And then you're adding this, because each one of these represents the total amount, the total points per category of questions, you have to add them to one another, and you get 70 as your total. Right, so number 9 says right triangles LMN and PQR are similar. So let's just go ahead and draw that out. They are right triangles, so we're going to have a 90-degree angle. And they're similar, so that means that they have to be related in some way. And whenever you're dealing with related, triangles, the sides are going to have to correspond in one way or another, right? And here it's telling me that L and M correspond to P and Q. So an angle M has a measure of 53, right? So here, let's just say that this is LMN. So this is my triangle. And we know that M has a measure of 53. So let's just say that this is M and that this is 53 degrees, right? Now, we know that L and M correspond to P and Q, right? So this means that this has to be Q. And let's just say that L is up here and that P is up here, right? That means that this has to be N and then that this has to be R, right? So how did I do that? So here, I drew 2 right triangles, and then I just randomly assigned a degree value to one of the sides, right? So when it tells me that angle M has a measure of 53 degrees, I can either put it here or here. I just decided to put it here, right? So next, it tells me that L and M correspond to P and Q, which means that L, right? L has to go with P. So the same place where L is, P has to be. So if it's at the tip of the triangle, if L is at the tip, P has to be at the tip because they're both corresponding. And the same thing goes for M and Q, right? Because they say that they're corresponding. And that means that there can only be one more place for N and R to go, and that's at the right triangle. And we can tell that this is correct because when we read it, L, M, N, P, Q, R, right? No matter how we read it, go P, Q, R, L, M, N. So all we did was we just constructed our 2 similar triangles. Very important skill. And now it's asking us, what is the measure of angle Q? Well, the thing with similar triangles is that the angle values are always going to be the same. So angle L and angle P are always going to be the same because they're similar. The same way that angle M and angle Q are going to be the same value. So the answer is going to be B. All right, moving on to number 10. Over here it says that the solution, it gives us the system of equations, and it's saying the solution to the given system of equations is x comma y. What is the value of x, right? So whenever we have a system of equations, that just means that we have 2 equations, 2 or more equations, and the solution is going to be the point at which these equations intersect, right? Or the point at which they are equal to one another. So as you can see, this is the equation to two different lines, and they're going to be going like this, and the solution is just the point at which they both touch, or the point which they both intersect. And it's asking me, in that point, in that x comma y, the point that they intersect, the point that they cross, what is the value of x? So what is the x value of that point? And there's a bunch of math that you could do. You could set them equal to one another, or you can use your Desmos graphing calculator. And I'll show you how. All you have to do is just plug this system of equations into the calculator. So here you could just type in y is equal to negative 3x, and that's going to give me that line. Here, for the second equation, I could just type in 4x plus y is equal to 15. And now I have my two lines. All I have to do is just find the point at which they intersect. You can see that up here they're moving away from one another, and here they're going closer. So my point of intersection automatically has to be somewhere down here. And I can see that that point is going to be at 15 comma negative 45. Right? I can keep on scrolling in, and that's just the point where they touch, right? And if I highlight one of these lines, the gray point is always going to be the point of intersection. That means that the solution, or the point at which they touch or intersect, is going to be at 15 comma negative 45. And it's asking me what is the x value. The x value has to be 15. So moving on to number 11, it asks which of the following equations which of the following equations is the most appropriate linear model for the data shown in the scatter plot, right? So here we have this scatter plot, and it has a bunch of points. And what they're asking you is if you were to draw a line between these points, right? So let's just say you draw a line between them, right? To represent the data, to represent the trend. Here, you could see that the points are all going down. As the x increases, the points go down in value, right? So if you were to draw a line to represent this or to relate them to one another, for example, like this, draw a line and you like show the general path of the data, what is the equation of this line? So the first thing is I draw this line and I notice that it's going down, right? It's sloping downwards, which means that if this was a line, y equals mx plus b, my m has to be negative in order to get a line that slopes downwards. So automatically c and d are off the table because they don't have a negative slope. The next thing I'm looking at is my b, or my y-intercept. And my y-intercept is just the point at which I intercept the y-axis, right? It's the point at which I cross this line over here, right? So the answer is going to be b, because if my y-intercept was negative, that means that I'm intercepting the y-axis at like negative 10, which is all the way down here. But if it's positive 10.1, I'm intercepting that y-axis at positive 10.1, which you can see right here. It's crossing the y-axis there, right? And I can graph this into my graphing calculator and make sure. Negative 1.9x plus 10.1. This needs to be negative 1.9. And over here, I see that same shape. It's going down. It's crossing the x-axis at 10. It has to be the right answer. Moving on to number 12, it says the graph of y is equal to f of x is shown where the function f is defined by f of x is equal to a times x to the power of 3 plus b to the second power plus cx plus d. A, B, C, and D are constant. How many values of x does f of x is equal to? Is f of x equal to 0? All right. So here we have just this like unknown equation, and it's just asking me what values, how many times is y equal to 0, or how many times is f of x equal to 0. So let's just see how many times it crosses the y-axis, or how many times it crosses the x-axis, right? So every time a point lies on this line, on the x-axis, its y is automatically equal to 0, right? So that means that every time it touches this line, its y is equal to 0. So over here, it happens, it touches the x-axis at this point, then it goes up, then it continues to go down, then it starts to come up, and then it touches the x-axis here again, then it continues to come up, starts to go down, and then it touches the x-axis right here a final time. So then f of x is equal to 0 at 3 different times, or at 3 different values, right? So the answer is C3. So for example, f of x is equal to 0 at 7, right? Because that's the point. It's 7 comma 0. At 4, right? 4 comma 0, and at negative 2 comma 0. So the answer to 12 is going to be C. Moving on to number 13, it says Vivian bought party hats and cupcakes for $71. Each package of party hats costs $3, and each cupcake costs $1. If Vivian bought 10 packages of party hats, how many cupcakes did she buy? So she bought party hats and cupcakes for $71. She knows that each package of party hats costs $3 and each cupcake cost $1. And if she bought 10 packages of party hats, how many cupcakes did she buy? So let's just represent this. So here we have $71, and this is going to be equal to X party hats, so X packages of party hats, plus Y packages of cupcakes, right? So why are we doing 3x? We're doing 3x because 3 is the amount of money per one cupcake. Per one party hat, right? So if she has 2 party hats, it's 6. 3, it's 9. We put that 3 in front of there just to show you the price, 3x. And then we're adding it to 1y, or 1 times y is just y, right? Why are we doing that? Because each cupcake costs $1 and our cupcakes is going to be y. So she says that if Vivian bought 10 packages of party hats, so x is equal to 10 because 10 is our party hats, how many cupcakes did she buy, right? So 71 is now equal to 3 times 10, which is 30, plus y. So here we have, subtract 30 from both sides, and we have 41 is equal to y. So she bought 41 cupcakes. Moving on to number 14, it says, what is one of the solutions to the given equation? So when we're talking about solutions, it's a value of x, or rather a value of z, that makes this true. So what value of z would make this equation equal to 0? And guess what? We can simply do that in our desmos graphing calculator. Plug it in here. We can, instead of doing z, we can just do x squared. So x squared plus 10x minus 24 is equal to 0. Enter. And here we have two values where x is equal to 0. X is equal to 0 at 2. We have 2 comma 0. Oops, wrong side of my pen. We have 2 comma 0. And we also have negative 12 comma 0. So the answer is either going to be 2 or negative 12. You can't put both. You can only put one. I'm going to put 2. But if you put negative 12, it would be the same thing. 15 says bacteria are growing in a liquid growth medium. There are about 300,000 cells per milliliter during the initial observation. The number of cells per milliliter doubles every 3 hours. How many cells per milliliter will there be 15 hours after the initial observation, right? So for this one, you need to know the exponential growth formula. And that means that total is equal to the initial times 1 plus the rate at which they grow raised to the power of time that passes. So here, our total is going to be equal to our initial, which is 300,000, right? So she has, because at first there were 300,000 cells per milliliter, right? That's during the initial observation, so that's our starting point. And here, we're adding 1 to our rate. If the number of cells doubles every 3 hours, that means that our rate of growth is 100%, right? We're increasing by 100%. We're doubling, right? For example, if I have 2... and I double my 2 to get 4. What's 100% of 2? 100% of 2 is 2, right? And 2 plus 2 is going to equal to 4, right? So we're increasing by 100%, and 100% is just 1. And this is happening every x over 3 hours, right? So total is going to equal to 300,000 times 2 raised to the power of x hours over 3. Why do we divide this by 3? Because it happens every 3 hours, right? It doubles every 3 hours. It can't just be x, it has to be x divided by 3. So now we just have to plug in values, right? Total is equal to 300,000 times 2 to the power of 15 over 3. Just plug this into your calculator, see what you get. So over here we have 300,000 times 2 raised to the power of 15 divided by 3, which is 5. And that's going to equal to 9,600,000, which is choice D. 16 says, which expression is equivalent to 6x to the power of 8y squared plus 2x squared y squared, right? So which one of these is equivalent? In other words, which one of these are equal to one another? It's just asking you to simplify this. Whenever you have to simplify something, just look at what you can take out of both terms, right? So what do both terms have in common? Well, they have a y in common, right? They also have an x in common, and they have a 6 in common, because if you know that like 6 goes into 12, right? So we can factor out 6 We can factor out 6, we can factor out x, and we can factor out y, because each of these terms has a 6, an x, and a y. So, by how much can we take it out? Well, we can take it out by 2 by y squared, right? Because here we have y squared, here we have y squared. So it's perfectly legal for us to factor out y squared because y squared is in both, right? Now, when it comes to x, we can't factor out x to the power of 8 because we don't have x to the power of 8 here. Instead, what we can do is we can factor out x squared, right? Because x to the power of 8 is just equal to x squared times x to the 4th, right? That's going to equal, x squared times x to the power of 6, right? So we can just technically we can take that out, right? So when it comes to this bit, oh no, cancel. Oops. So when it comes to this big number, all we did was we identified what they have in common. We know that they have 6 in common. We know that they have x squared in common. We know that they have y squared in common. This is everything that we can take out of here because we have both of those values on these sides, right? So first of all, if we take out 6, if we factor out 6, right, we're just dividing by 6 on both sides. So taking out 6, boom, that's going to leave us with x squared, y squared, plus 12 divided by 6 is just going to be 2x squared, y squared. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to have to take out the x squared. Now we take out the x squared, we're going to be left with, it's the same thing as dividing by x squared. So here, we're left with x to the power of 6, y squared, plus 2 plus y squared. The last thing we have to do is we have to take out y squared, right? Which you divide by y squared. And we get x to the power of 6 plus 2. So here we have x to the power of 6 plus 2. And now we have to multiply it by everything we took out, which is 6x squared y squared. And that's going to be choice C. That's all we had to do there. Moving on to number 17, it says the neighborhood consists of a 2-hectare park and a 35-hectare residential area. The total number of trees in the neighborhood is 3,935. The equation 2x plus 35y is equal to 3,934 represents the solution. Which of the following is the best interpretation of x in this context, right? So we have a 2-hectare park and a 35-hectare residential area. So just by looking at the coefficients have to match. So the coefficient is the number in front of a variable. So the number in front of the x is 2, and 2 is a 2-hectare park, right? So we know that x has to do something, has to equal to something, or has to be related to parks. All right. And now we have 35y, so we know that y has to, and here y represents hectare residential area, so y has to represent something that has to do with residential area. And if you really think about this, 2x, or 2 times the amount of parks, plus 35 times the amount of residential areas is equal to 3,934, which is the total number of trees. So, really, if you think about this, x has to represent the average number of trees per hectare in the park, right? Because x has to do something with parks, so we're going to have to eliminate whatever we have to do with residential area. We know that it's not going to be the total number of trees in the park, because then why would we be doubling it? And D, also we have to eliminate b because that has to do something with the residential area, right? Here we know that C isn't correct because we are multiplying x by something. So we know that it's not the complete value. If this was a like actual value, then it would be the total number of trees in the park. But this is being multiplied by some random number. So we have to just take it that is a rate. That is 2 times x. We don't know what x is. We don't know what the total is. But we know that it does give us the average number of trees per hectare in the park. That's what x represents. And you can confirm this. You can confirm this by saying that 2 hectares, that's what the 2 represents, right? You can multiply this by the number of trees per, remember per means divide, hectare. And think about it. Look at this. When we multiply these, the hectare up here and the hectare down here cancel, and you just have 2 times the number of trees, right? So really, x has to be the average number of trees per hectare, because that's the only way you get rid of this hectare, and you're only left with the number of trees, which is what 3,934 represents. So moving on to number 18, it says the graph shows the relationship between the number of shares of stock from company A, X, and the number of shares from company B, which is represented by the y-axis. That Simone can purchase. Which equation could represent the situation, right? So, guess what? Are we really going to do this math, guys? No, we're not going to do this math. We're going to plug it into our graphing calculator. Here we have y is equal to 8x plus 12. Does this look anything close to what this graph looks like? No, it's facing the wrong way, right? So we know that A can't be the right answer. Let's move on to B, right? 8x plus 12y, oh, right here. 8x plus 12y has to equal to, 8x plus 12y has to equal to 480, right? So if it's equal to 480, well, at least this is in the correct shape, right? It's sloping downwards, and we know that up here we have 40, down here we have 60, up here we have 40, down here we have 60. So this is a very good candidate. This matches the x and y intercepts, and it's the same shape, right? So we know that B could be the answer. Let's move on to C. Y is equal to 12x plus 8. Once again, it's sloping the wrong way. It's the wrong shape. This is wrong. And finally, here we have 12x plus 8y is equal to 480. And over here, we have an issue, right? We have two choices that look pretty much the same, right? Graphically speaking, we don't know how to differentiate between them, right? So the best way to do this is just to look at a point on this graph and see if it lies on the point of the other graph, right? So here on this graph, right? First of all, the equation is going to represent every single point that ever lies on this graph, right? So this equation, the correct solution, has to include this point and all of the points on the graph, right? So let's look at a point that's easily definable right here, right? So this is going to be 30, 20. And let's just see if choice D has 30, 20. Does it? Well, 30, and at 30, we get 15, which is wrong. This correct point does not lie on choice D's graph, which means that choice B has to be our correct answer. And once again, I can definitely confirm that. 8x plus 12y is equal to 480. If you look here at 30, we have 20, 30, 20. So, you know, if you don't want to do math, the way you could do this is you could just keep plugging in these equations into your graphing calculator until you find one that is in the correct shape, that is the correct x-intercept and the y-intercept. And then, if you're stuck between two choices, you could just take a random point in between, like anywhere here, right? And see which graph matches that point. So moving on to number 19, it says circle A has a radius of 3n, circle B has a radius of 129n, where n is a positive constant. The area of circle B is how many times greater than the circle of area A, right? So what's the area of the circle? A is equal to pi r squared. So what's this radius of circle A? Sorry, what's the area of circle A? The area of circle A is going to be pi times the radius squared. What's our radius? Our radius is going to be 3n. So it's going to be pi times 3n squared, which is the same thing as saying A is equal to pi times 9n squared. Now, circle B has a radius of 129n, so A is still going to equal to pi r squared, but the area of circle B is now going to be A is equal to pi times 129n squared. So A has to be pi times, let's see, what's 129 squared? 129 times 129, pretty big number, 16,641. Pi times 16,641 n squared, right? Now, how many times bigger is this than this, right? 9n squared pi is equal to 16641 n squared pi times, like, let's just say A, right? Where A is the amount of times bigger. When you say something is times bigger, you're just saying how many times do I need to multiply that to get the bigger value, right? Or rather, A times this, right? So all we have to do is just divide both sides by 9n squared pi, divide by 9n squared pi, and we get the scale factor, we get A, right? So A has to equal to 16641 n squared pi divided by 9n squared pi. The pi's cancel out, the n squared cancel out. We get A is equal to this big number, right? So I'll just do that right here. And we're going to divide that number by 9. Divided by 9. That's going to give me 1,849, which is choice D, the correct answer. So, look, we found the area, or the quote-unquote area, of A and B, okay? We found that the area of A was equal to pi times 9n squared, and the area of B is equal to pi times this big number squared, right? Next, whenever we have how many times the area, all that's saying is, what do I need to multiply by the area of A in order to get the area of B? Or what number do I have to multiply by the smaller number to get the bigger number, right? So A, which is how many times bigger, is we're going to have to multiply by A to get this, right? And we get 1,849. So, if we have 9n squared pi, we have to multiply by 1,849. We have to multiply by that to get B, which means that B is this much times bigger. That's all. Moving on to number 20. It says the frequency table summarizes 57 data values in a data set. What is the maximum data value in the data set, right? So in other words, what's the biggest number that occurs here? Here we have our data value, and here we have our frequency. So these are two. This is the actual numbers, and this is the amount of times that number appears. Right, so the actual number 6, the value of 6, appears 6 times. So you have 6, 6, 6, right? So it's asking me what is the maximum data value in this data set, right? So what is the biggest number in this data set? The biggest number is obviously going to be 14. That's all. And 14 occurs 6 times, by the way. So number 21 says that in the xy plane, a circle in the xy plane has a diameter with endpoints of 2, 4, and 2, 14. An equation of the circle is x minus 2 squared plus y minus 9 squared is equal to r squared, where r is a positive constant. What is the value of r? Guess what we're going to do? We're going to plug this in to our graphing calculator, right? But before we can do that, we need to solve for r squared, right? So instead of plugging it in, we need to see that it has a diameter with endpoints of 2, 4, and 2, 14, right? So if this is a circle, and let's just say that this is the xy plane, here at 2, 4 we have 1 point, and here at 2, 14, oh, maybe this isn't the best drawing. So look, we'll use the graphing calculator to confirm this, but here's our circle. Here we have the point 2, 4, and here we have the point 2, 14, right? And this is going to be the diameter, so it passes through the center, right? And we're trying to solve for the radius, or r, which is going to be half of this distance, right? So all we have to do is find the distance between these 2 points. Well, if here I'm at 2 and here I'm at 2, and I'm going from 4 down here, that this is 4, and I'm going all the way up to 14, what's the distance between it? Well, there's 10 between this, right? Because 4 plus 10 is equal to 14, right? So I have to go 10 up from 4 to get to 14. So that means that my diameter is going to be 10, and that means that my radius is going to be 5, right? So the value of r is going to be 5. I don't see why you would need to check this in the Desmos graphic calculator. Probably don't need to. Answer is 5. Moving on to number 22, it says the measure of angle r is 2 pi over 3 radians. The measure of angle t is 5 pi over 12 radians greater than the measure of angle r. What is the measure of angle t? Okay, so we're dealing with degrees, so to make this easier, I would just convert both of these into degrees. How do you convert into degrees? You multiply by pi, 180 divided by pi. So this is going to equal to what? This is going to equal to 2 times 180 divided by 3. Here, turn that to 1, turn that to 60. So here this is just equal to 120 degrees. So 120 degrees is going to be the measure of angle r. And here we have t, which is going to be 5 pi over 12 radians. Multiply this by 180 divided by pi. Pi is going to cancel out. What's 180 divided by 12? 180 divided by 12 is going to be 15. So this is going to be 1, this is going to be 15, and 15 times 5 is 125. So that means that t is equal to 125, I think. 15 times 5 is equal to 75. Never mind. T is equal to 75 degrees. Made a mistake. Right? So the measure of angle t is 5 pi over 12 radians greater than the measure of angle r. What is the measure of angle t in degrees, right? So the trap answer here is 75. We know that angle t is equal to 5 pi, this is 75 degrees greater than the measure of angle r. So t is not 75. T is 75 plus r, which is 120. So 75 plus 120 is 195. Moving on to 23. It says that a certain town has an area of 4.36 square miles. What is the area in square yards, right? So before we do anything, notice that we're dealing with square miles. 3.6 SQ, or rather just miles squared. Miles squared. And here we have 1 mile is equal to 1760 yards, right? Now we want square yards, so we're just going to square both these values, and we know that 1 mile squared is equal to 1760 squared, right? So what is that? 1760 times 1760. That's a pretty big number, 3,970,600, right? So now what do we have to do? We know what miles squared is, right? And we know that we have 4.36 miles squared. So we have to multiply 4.36 miles squared by 1,760 squared, because 1 mile squared is equal to 1,760 squared. That's all. So we just multiply this by this, 4.36. We just Control C that value, place it into here, and times 4.36, and we get 13,505,000, which is going to be choice D, right? So don't get tricked up by that. We're dealing with square yards. That means that this conversion factor, we need to square on both sides to get square miles, and that's how we convert. We can subtract 104 squared from both sides. Don't write the equation side. Oops. So minus 104. And we know that k radical 3 squared is equal to 208 squared minus 104 squared. Whatever. You can see that I wrote that out there. So what is that equal to? 208 squared minus 104 squared is equal to 32,448. 32,448. Right? And just be careful with the math. It's the same thing as saying k squared times 9. Oh, sorry, k squared times 3. So here, let's just divide this by 3. Copy and paste that. Control C, Control V. This divided by 3. This is equal to this number. So we know that k squared is equal to 10816. Now we just have to find radical k. And I think you can find that by SQRT. Yeah, press SQRT. And here paste, oh, not that value, 10816. And you get that k is equal to 104. That's all. Right, and that's question number 27. That's section 1 completed. In-depth review of each question. So, in summary, all you did was you figured out what the length of one side was. You know that each of these are equal to one another, so 3s has to equal to the total length here. Next, you drew in the height. That was the height, right? Whenever you have the height, it splits the equilateral triangle into 2 equal sections. So, because this total line was 208, this got split up into 104 and 104. Then, you treated this as its own little triangle. You remember the Pythagorean theorem that a squared plus b squared is equal to c squared. So k radical 3 plus 104 squared is equal to 208 squared. You evaluated this side, right? You got this big number. And you squared this, right? K times radical 3 squared is equal to k squared times radical 3 squared, which is k squared times 3. Then you divided both sides by 3. And then you found the square root of k squared, which was the square root of this big number. And you got k is equal to 104. That's all. That's all 27 questions. I know this took a while, but I tried to go in the greatest depth per each question. I hope you learned something. If you want me to keep on doing these review sections, maybe a module 2 from the same test, let me know in the comments below. That's it. Have a nice day.